My name is Sophia, I'm 28, and I watched my husband cheat on me with my own sister, thinking I was blind. Before I tell you how his signature on a stack of housing documents cost him his marriage, his career, and his entire future, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The key turned silently in the lock. That was one of the first things I'd mastered after the accident, silent movement. When you can't see the world, you learn to move through it without disturbing it. It becomes a kind of survival instinct. On this Tuesday afternoon, that instinct served a very different purpose. I'd come home early from my physical therapy session. My therapist had ended our session ahead of schedule, pleased with my progress in navigating unfamiliar spaces. I was supposed to call for a car service, but a wave of sudden exhaustion hit me. I just wanted my own bed. I hailed a cab instead, a small act of rebellion against the rigid schedule my life had become. Ethan, my husband, wasn't expecting me for another 3 hours. I pictured his surprise, the warm hug I'd receive. The house was quiet, but it wasn't an empty quiet. It was the charged silence of a room where people are trying not to be heard. I stood perfectly still in the foyer, my hand still on the doorknob, and I let my other senses take over. The air was thick with it, the cloying, overly sweet scent of my sister Maya's perfume. It was a cheap scent she insisted on wearing, a stark contrast to the subtle, clean fragrances I preferred. It had no place in my home. My heart began a low, heavy drum against my ribs. I slid my shoes off, my bare feet making no sound on the cool hardwood floor. My white cane remained folded in my bag. I didn't need it here. I knew every inch of this house. I knew that the third floorboard from the left in the hallway creaked. I knew the exact distance from the entryway to the living room archway. As I moved closer, I heard it. A soft, breathy giggle that I knew as well as my own name. It was Maya. Then came a low, masculine murmur. Ethan. My Ethan. The drumming in my chest stopped. Everything stopped. It felt as if the world had frozen on its axis, leaving me in a vacuum of roaring silence. My breath caught in my throat. I pressed myself flat against the wall in the shadows of the hallway, just outside the archway, my body turning to ice. They were on the sofa. Our sofa. The one we had spent a whole Saturday picking out. The place where he would hold me and describe the sunsets he knew I missed so much. The sounds they were making now, they were sounds of betrayal, each one a physical blow. But it was their words that turned the ice in my veins to razor-sharp shards. Are you sure she's not coming back soon? Maya whispered. Her voice was laced with a thrill, the excitement of a thief. Relax, Ethan chuckled. That low, warm sound that used to be my comfort was now the hiss of a snake. She's stuck at that pointless therapy until 5. And what if she did come home? She'd walk right past us. She's just a blind housewife. Clueless. Can't see a thing. A fresh wave of giggles. God, that makes it so much hotter, Maya breathed. Doing this, right under her nose. It's like a secret performance. I heard the distinct rustle of silk. And this robe, wearing her things makes me feel like I own this place. Like I own you. My robe. The cream-colored silk robe with the delicate lace trim. A gift from him, for our first anniversary. A gift he had chosen because he said it felt as soft as my skin. She was wearing it. She was defiling it, defiling my home, my marriage, my life. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The woman who had loved Ethan Miller, the woman who had sacrificed for him, died in that hallway. In her place, something cold and hard and utterly clear was born. Rage is a hot emotion, but what I felt was the opposite. It was a chilling, absolute certainty. They saw me as a prop. A blind, helpless object. They had no idea that when you take away a person's sight, their other senses become sharper. I could hear the lie in every one of his words. I could smell the cheapness of her betrayal. And now, I could see them for what they truly were, parasites. I stood in the shadows, an unseen ghost in my own home, and I listened as they sealed their fates. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. The time for that was over. It was time to plan. Standing there, listening to the two people I should have been able to trust the most in the world tear my life apart, I felt the ground just crumble away. I have to wonder, has anyone else ever felt that specific, soul-crushing betrayal from the people closest to you? If you're listening to this and you understand, just leave a 1 in the comments. I really just need to know I'm not alone in feeling this way. Let me take you back 2 years. Before the carefully folded white cane, before the world became a map of sounds and textures, before I learned the art of silent movement. My world was once blindingly bright, and at the center of it was Ethan. We met in our senior year of college. He was magnetic. He came from nothing, a kid from the wrong side of the tracks who had fought his way into a top university on a scholarship. He had a hunger to prove himself that I, a girl who had been given everything, found intoxicating. My father, Robert Thompson, saw it differently. He was a man who had built a global logistics empire, Thompson Enterprises, from a single delivery truck. He could read people like a balance sheet, and his assessment of Ethan was brutal. "He doesn't love you, Sophia," he told me bluntly one evening in his study, the scent of old leather and success hanging in the air. "He loves what you represent. He loves the access, the name. He sees you as a shortcut." I refused to believe it. I saw Ethan's ambition not as a flaw, but as a virtue. My father's world was one of inherited privilege. Ethan wanted to build his own. So, when he asked me to move with him to Connecticut after graduation, to support him while he launched his own marketing startup, I said yes without hesitation. I turned my back on a guaranteed executive position at my father's company, on the trust fund that was waiting for me, on the entire life that had been mapped out for me. I wanted our success to be ours, built from the ground up. And for 3 years, it felt like we were doing it. I took a modest job as an office manager to ensure we had a steady income while Ethan poured every waking hour and every spare dollar into his fledgling company. We lived in a small apartment, ate pasta more nights than not, and we were happy. Or so I thought. We were a team. The day the world went dark was a Saturday in late October. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the roads like oil. We were driving back from a meeting with a potential client, a meeting that had gone incredibly well. It was the breakthrough Ethan had been working for. He was ecstatic, driving a little too fast, his hands gesturing wildly as he talked about his plans for the future. Our future. I saw the deer a split second before he did. It bolted from the woods directly into our path. Ethan swore and swerved instinctively. But he overcorrected. The car spun out on the wet pavement, careening directly towards a massive oak tree on the passenger side. On his side. In that heart-stopping moment, there was no thought. There was only the primal, overwhelming need to protect him. I yanked the steering wheel hard to the left. It was a purely sacrificial act. The impact, when it came, was on my side. I remember the horrific sound of metal crunching, the spiderweb of cracks exploding across the windshield. I remember a singular, blindingly white pain behind my eyes, as if a star had gone supernova inside my skull. And then, absolute, silent, unending blackness. I woke up days later in a hospital room. The first thing I was aware of was the scratchy feel of the hospital sheets and the sound of Ethan's ragged sobs. He was holding my hand, his tears falling onto my skin. He told me what the doctors had already told him. The impact had caused severe trauma. Shards of glass had done irreparable damage. My optic nerves were severed. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," he cried, his voice thick with guilt. "This is all my fault. I'll make it up to you, I swear. I will be your eyes. I will spend the rest of my life taking care of you." And I, wrapped in bandages and a world of darkness, believed him. I held onto his promise like a drowning woman holds onto a life raft. He was my hero. He was the man I had saved, who would now save me in return. I didn't realize then that he wasn't offering me a lifetime of devotion. He was sentencing me to a lifetime of debt, a debt he would soon grow to resent. The care that was once tender became perfunctory. The patience wore thin, replaced by heavy sighs of frustration. His world was expanding, his business was growing, while mine had shrunk to the four walls of our house. I had become his anchor, and he was beginning to hate me for it. I see it so clearly now. My sacrifice wasn't the foundation of our love, it was the beginning of his contempt. That night was an education in torment. After Ethan left our bedroom to join Maya in the guest room, I lay perfectly still in the king-sized bed that suddenly felt like a vast, empty wasteland. Every creak of the house was a new torture. Was that him, moving down the hall? Was that her, laughing softly? The darkness I had learned to navigate felt different now. It was no longer a simple absence of light, it was a suffocating, malevolent presence, filled with the ghosts of my broken trust. I felt a profound, bottomless loneliness. In my desire to prove my father wrong, to build a life with Ethan on our own terms, I had isolated myself. My college friends had slowly drifted away, tired of making plans with a couple who always cancelled. I had pushed my own family away, insisting on my independence. Ethan had become my sun, my moon, and all my stars. And I had just learned that my entire sky was a lie. Silent tears streamed from my useless eyes, soaking the pillowcase. I cried for the naive girl who had thrown away a fortune for a fairy tale. I cried for the woman who had traded her sight for a man who now saw her as an inconvenience. But as the hours ticked by, the grief began to burn away, leaving something harder in its place. It was a cold, hard nugget of rage. My father had been right. And in that admission, I found not shame, but a flicker of hope. I was not alone. Not really. My fingers, trembling slightly, found my phone on the nightstand. My thumb swiped across the screen, unlocking it with a muscle memory that had become second nature. I navigated to my contacts, my thumb hovering over the name, Dad. For a moment, I hesitated. The shame was immense. Calling him felt like admitting the ultimate defeat. It felt like crawling back from the wilderness after boasting I could build a kingdom there. But then, the image of Maya wearing my robe, the sound of Ethan's dismissive laugh, flooded my mind. Pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. I pressed the call button. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert even in the middle of the night. Sophia? Is everything okay? It's 2 a.m. My own voice came out as a strangled whisper. Dad. I need you. The simple admission broke the dam. A sob escaped, raw and ragged. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I expected an "I told you so." I braced for the lecture I probably deserved. Instead, there was only a short, sharp intake of breath on his end. Then, his voice, stripped of all its corporate bluster, was just the voice of a father, filled with a pain that mirrored my own. What did he do to you? And the story poured out of me. I told him everything. The perfume. The sounds. The cruel words. The robe. I didn't spare a single, humiliating detail. I talked until my throat was raw, the phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. When I finally fell silent, the only sound was my own ragged breathing. The silence on his end was heavy, dangerous. When he finally spoke, his voice was terrifyingly calm. I'm going to put him in the ground. No, I said, and the strength in my own voice surprised me. The plan, which had been a nebulous desire for revenge, was now taking shape, its edges sharpening. No, Dad. That's too quick. He thinks I'm a helpless invalid. He and my own sister, they see me as a joke. I want them to live with that assumption. I want them to get comfortable in their lies. And then, I want to be the one to pull the rug out from under them. I want to watch them fall. There was another pause. What do you need from me? He asked, his voice shifting from a father's rage to a CEO's strategic focus. I need a lawyer, I said, my voice growing stronger with every word. I need the most ruthless divorce attorney you can find. Someone who will help me bury him in paperwork. And I need your resources. I need information. But most importantly, I need you to do nothing until I say so. This has to be my play. You'll have it all, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. I have a woman for the job, Catherine Davies. They call her the Shark for a reason. I'll have her contact you tomorrow. Just be careful, Sophia. He thinks I'm blind, Dad, I said, a bitter smile touching my lips in the darkness. How much more careful can I be? When I hung up, the tears were gone. The woman who had gone to sleep that night was gone. I was now a soldier in a war of my own making. My blindness was no longer a cage. It was my camouflage. The days that followed were a surreal exercise in duplicity. I became a method actor in the tragic play of my own life. My stage was our home, my audience was the two-person cast of my betrayers. My role? The loving, helpless, and completely oblivious blind wife. It was exhausting. Every morning, I had to consciously remember to be the old Sophia. I'd reach for the coffee cup and let my hand hover for a moment, as if searching. I'd navigate rooms with a deliberate, careful slowness that was no longer natural to me. My white cane, which for months had been a detested symbol of my dependence, was now my most valuable prop. I used it everywhere in the house, tapping my way through hallways I could have walked blindfolded, and now, I essentially was. There were close calls. One afternoon, Maya left one of her fashion magazines on the ottoman. I walked into the room, and my eyes, which were now constantly scanning, registered the bright, glossy cover. I almost commented on the ridiculous dress the model was wearing before I caught myself. Instead, I let my cane tap against the leg of the ottoman, and my hand accidentally brushed against the magazine. I feigned a slight jump. Oh, what was that? Just a magazine, sis, Maya said, her voice bored. Watch where you're going. Sorry, I mumbled, my heart hammering. It was a constant, nerve-wracking performance. My secret weapon was my first meeting with Catherine Davies, the lawyer my father had hired. Ms. Davies was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me, and a handshake that could crush granite. We met at a discreet hotel suite my father had booked. Your father explained the situation, she said, getting straight to business. The betrayal is appalling. But from a legal standpoint, it's a gift. She laid out the strategy. He thinks you're helpless, which makes him arrogant. And arrogant men make mistakes. Our goal is to let him make as many as possible, while we document everything. She gave me a set of tiny, nearly invisible digital audio recorders. Plant these in the living room, the kitchen, his home office. Your blindness is the perfect cover. You can fumble around, accidentally drop one behind a cushion or tape one under a table. He'll never suspect a thing. That night, I did just that. My hands trembled as I stuck a tiny recorder under the lip of the kitchen island while I was supposedly wiping down the counters. I dropped another behind the thick cushions of the living room sofa, the very sofa they had defiled, while pretending to look for the TV remote. Each act of espionage was terrifying, but also empowering. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was gathering intelligence. The recordings were a daily dose of poison. I would listen to them at night, huddled in my bathroom with the fan on, headphones pressed tightly to my ears. I heard them whispering about me. I heard them laughing at my expense. I heard them planning a future that didn't include me, a future funded by my supposed inheritance. Once our old man kicks the bucket, we'll be set for life, Ethan said one evening. We just have to keep her happy and dependent until then. Each word was a fresh stab to the heart, but it was also another piece of evidence, another brick in the wall of their downfall. I was no longer just faking blindness. I was weaponizing it. They thought my darkness was a weakness, a prison. They had no idea it was my observation post, my hiding place, and the perfect camouflage for the predator I was becoming. Our 5th wedding anniversary was the first major test of my new, cold-blooded resolve. Ethan announced his surprise with the kind of smug magnanimity that made me want to scream. He was taking me to the Gilded Sparrow, a place so exclusive you had to book months in advance. It was a grand gesture designed to broadcast to the world what a devoted husband he was to his poor, disabled wife. "Nothing but the best for you, Sophia," he said, kissing my cheek. His lips felt like ice. The first insult of the evening was the dress. He had it laid out on the bed for me when I got out of the shower. The fabric was a heavy, luxurious silk. The color, he told me, was a stunning emerald green. I ran my hands over it, a picture-perfect smile on my face. "It's beautiful, honey." "Thank you." Inside, I was seething. Green. The one color he knew, with absolute certainty, that I despised. It was a small, petty cruelty, a secret joke at my expense. He was dressing his blind wife in a color she hated, and she would never even know. It was a testament to his contempt. He didn't just see me as blind, he saw me as a doll to be dressed up and displayed. I wore the dress. It felt like a shroud. The private room at the restaurant was an extension of the insult. He described it to me with glee. "Everything is green, babe. The tablecloths, the flowers, they even have little green candles. It's like a forest in here. I did it all for you." He was practically glowing with self-satisfaction. We sat down, and I focused on my performance. I kept my eyes unfocused, my head slightly tilted as if I were listening intently. I let him order for me, let him guide my hand to my wineglass. I was the very picture of graceful dependence. And then, right on cue, Maya arrived. "Ethan! Fancy seeing you here," she exclaimed, her voice a symphony of fake surprise. "Maya!" "What a coincidence," he said, standing to greet her. He introduced us, his voice oozing with false charm. "This is my lovely wife, Sophia." "I've heard so much about you," Maya gushed, stepping closer. Her cloying perfume assaulted my senses. She took my offered hand. Her skin was cool and smooth. "It's a pleasure." As I held her hand, I let my thumb accidentally brush against her other hand, which was resting on the table. My fingers, now highly sensitive to texture and shape, immediately found it. A large, multifaceted stone set in a heavy band. It was a ring. I let my fingers linger for a second too long, feigning a bit of blind clumsiness as I explored its shape. It was the exact custom design, the intricate vintage-style setting we had spent weeks sketching together. My dream ring. On her hand. A white-hot wave of fury surged through me, so powerful it made my ears ring. For a terrifying second, I thought I was going to lose control, that I would lunge across the table. But I took a slow, deep breath and reined it in. I squeezed her hand gently. "It's so lovely to meet Ethan's assistant," I said, my voice as sweet as saccharin. "He speaks so highly of you." I let my hand drop. "And what a stunning ring you're wearing. You must have a very special man in your life." I felt the sudden tension in the air. Ethan cleared his throat. Maya snatched her hand back as if burned. "Oh, it's just a family heirloom," she stammered. "How lovely," I said, my lips curved into a serene smile. "You should treasure it." They made their excuses, and Maya scurried away. Ethan sat back down, visibly relieved. He thought the danger had passed. He had no clue that I had just confirmed one of my biggest suspicions, and that the price for his betrayal had just gone up exponentially. He poured me more wine, and I let him, playing the part of the happy wife, all while my mind was a cold, clear machine, calculating his demise. Later, as the disastrous anniversary dinner was winding down, Ethan presented me with his gift. The large, square box was wrapped in crinkly paper that felt expensive. "For you, my love," he said, his voice full of practiced affection. I opened it slowly, my fingers working the ribbons. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was the designer handbag I'd admired in a magazine months ago. He'd remembered. For a foolish, fleeting second, my heart clenched. Maybe there was a shred of the man I loved still in there. Then my fingers touched the bag itself. And the illusion shattered. The leather wasn't quite right. It was stiff where it should have been supple. I ran my thumb over the stitching near the zipper. It was slightly uneven, a fraction of a millimeter off. I found the metal logo plate. It was too light, the edges not as crisply defined as they should be. It was a counterfeit. A high-quality one, designed to fool the eye, but not the touch of someone who knew the difference. And certainly not designed to fool his blind wife, who would never see its imperfections. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He hadn't just forgotten me, he was actively mocking me with a cheap imitation, while, I had no doubt, the real one was probably already in Maya's closet. "Oh, Ethan," I breathed, my voice a perfect imitation of joyful surprise. It's everything I wanted." "Thank you." I clutched the fake bag to my chest as if it were a priceless treasure. It was in that moment of profound, internal bitterness that a stranger approached our table. "Ethan Miller?" I apologize for interrupting. Ethan's demeanor changed instantly, from doting husband to schmoozing businessman. "Nathan Foster." Not an interruption at all. "It's great to see you. You know my wife, Sophia, don't you?" He'd mentioned Nathan Foster before. A major potential client. A self-made man who had built a tech empire. I turned my head toward the sound of his voice and offered a polite smile. "Mr. Foster. It's a pleasure." "The pleasure is all mine, Sophia. And please, call me Nathan," he said. His voice was a calm, warm baritone. Unlike most people, who tended to raise their voice when speaking to me, he spoke normally. "I hope you're having a wonderful anniversary." "We are, thank you," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. As Ethan launched into a sycophantic monologue about a recent market trend, I reached for my water glass. My movements were deliberately a little clumsy, a little uncertain. My fingers brushed against the glass, and I knocked it over. Water flooded a portion of the tablecloth. "Honestly, Sophia," Ethan sighed, the familiar sound of exasperation. "Just stay still. I'll get a waiter." He sounded more embarrassed than concerned. But Nathan was already moving. "It's no trouble," he said smoothly. He grabbed his own napkin and efficiently soaked up the spill. He then turned to me, and I could feel his presence, his focused attention. "Are you all right? It didn't splash on your dress, did it?" The simple question, the direct address to me and not to my husband about me, was so unexpected it almost made me gasp. He was speaking to me as a person, not as a problem to be managed. "I'm perfectly fine," I said, my smile, for the first time that night, feeling real. "Thank you for your kindness, Nathan." "It's not kindness, it's just basic decency," he replied quietly, his words a direct, if unintentional, indictment of my husband. They spoke for another minute before Nathan made his excuses. "It was truly a pleasure to meet you, Sophia," he said, his words warm and sincere, before he left. As he walked away, I felt a profound sense of loss. He was a glimpse into a world I had forgotten existed, a world where men treated women with respect and consideration. It wasn't a world of grand romantic gestures, but of small, decent acts. And it was a world away from the prison of contempt Ethan had built for me. The encounter didn't make me sad, it made me furious. And it made me more determined than ever to burn my prison to the ground and walk out into the sun. Across the room, I could sense, more than see, Maya glaring at me from the bar. She had seen it all. Good. Let her wonder. The week after the anniversary was when the final pieces of the trap were set. The audio recorders had captured more than enough evidence, hours of Ethan and Maya plotting, mocking me, and discussing his business dealings in detail, including some legally gray areas he was exploring to fast-track the Johnson contract. Ms. Davies was delighted. "This is gold, Sophia. Pure gold." Now, all we needed was the final, critical piece, his signature on the divorce papers. My initial idea of hiding it in some shopping invoices was deemed too risky by Ms. Davies. "It needs to be plausible," she'd said. "It needs to be something he would sign without reading under pressure." And so, we devised a new, much more intricate plan. The setup began on a Wednesday. A man posing as a paralegal from our mortgage company, in reality, an associate from Ms. Davies' firm, came to the house. I made sure Ethan was there. The man explained, in excruciatingly boring detail, that due to a recent change in federal lending regulations, we needed to refile some of our home loan paperwork. He left a thick folder of documents, saying a lawyer would be in touch to finalize them. It was all bureaucratic nonsense, perfectly designed to make Ethan's eyes glaze over. God, what a nightmare, Ethan had grumbled after the man left. More paperwork. I know, honey, I'd said soothingly. It sounds terribly complicated. The trigger was pulled 2 days later, on Friday morning. It was the day of Ethan's big presentation to Nathan Foster and a board of investors. He was a bundle of nerves, pacing the bedroom, practicing his pitch. This was the biggest meeting of his career. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the plan went into motion. The private investigator watching Maya sent a text, "Go." 5 minutes later, Ethan's phone shrilled. I was in the kitchen, carefully measuring coffee grounds by touch. I heard his voice, a sharp bark of panic. "What do you mean you're being towed? Where are you?" He stormed into the kitchen, knotting his tie with frantic energy. "Unbelievable. Maya's car broke down in a tow-away zone, and she's freaking out. Of all the stupid, idiotic. I have to go deal with it. I'm going to be late for the most important meeting of my life because of her." I turned my face towards him, my expression a mask of sympathy. "Oh, no. That's terrible. Of course, you have to go help her." "I know," he snapped, his panic making him cruel. He grabbed his briefcase. "This is a disaster." "Ethan, wait," I said, my voice stopping him at the door. "Before you go, the lawyer for the mortgage company just called. He said we have to sign those papers today. He said if they aren't messengered to his office by noon, we could face a penalty or even a change in our interest rate." He swore under his breath, a string of vile curses. "Are you kidding me? Now?" "I know, the timing is awful," I said, my voice full of apology. I walked over to the dining table and picked up the thick folder the paralegal had left. He said he marked all the spots we need to sign. I can't see the lines, Ethan. Could you just quickly sign for both of us?" He said it was standard procedure. He snatched the folder from me, his eyes blazing with impatience. Fine, whatever. Just show me where." I opened the folder. It was a dense brick of about 30 pages of impenetrable legalese. Ms. Davies had placed bright yellow sign here tabs on 5 different pages. The first 4 were for legitimate, meaningless mortgage addendums. The 5th tab, placed innocuously on page 22, was next to the signature line on the final page of our divorce settlement. He barely glanced at the pages. He was a man on a mission, his only goal to get this done and get to Maya. He flipped through, found the first yellow tab, scribbled his name. Flipped again. Scribbled. Flipped. Scribbled. Flipped. Scribbled. He got to the 5th tab. Without a flicker of hesitation, he signed his name, the pen scratching angrily against the paper. The sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. He slammed the folder shut and thrust it back at me. There. It's done. Call a messenger. I have to go. He ran out the door, leaving it swinging open behind him. I stood alone in the silence, holding the folder that contained my freedom. He had just signed away everything he had, all because he was too arrogant to read and too panicked to think. That was the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Pushing that folder into his hands, I knew that no matter what happened next, my life would never be the same. If you're still with me on this journey, just comment continue to let me know you're here. I really need that support to share what comes next, because this is where things get truly difficult. The signed folder was in the hands of a trusted courier and on its way to Ms. Davies' office within the hour. The trap was now fully set and legally binding. All that was left was to let the rat know he was caught. We decided to wait. Let him have his big meeting with Nathan Foster. Let him bask in the glow of what he surely believed was his impending success. The fall would be that much harder from a greater height. I spent the rest of the day in a strange state of suspended animation. I was free, but I wasn't. The final confrontation still loomed. I went through the motions of my day, my mind a million miles away. I tidied the house, not as a wife, but as an archivist, taking mental stock of the life I was about to leave behind. Every object held a memory, now tainted. The photograph on the mantelpiece of our wedding day felt like a picture of two strangers. That evening, I was sitting in the living room, listening to a podcast, when I knew the call was being made. My father had arranged it with Dr. Smith, an old and trusted family friend who was horrified when he learned what had been happening. I pictured Ethan in his gleaming office, probably celebrating with a glass of expensive scotch, retelling the story of his brilliant presentation. His secretary would buzz him. A Dr. Smith from St. Jude's was on the line. It was about his wife. I imagined the flicker of annoyance, quickly replaced by a feigned, dutiful concern. He would take the call, his voice dripping with faux worry. Dr. Smith? Is everything all right with Sophia? And then the doctor's calm, professional voice would deliver the first blow. Mr. Miller, I have some quite remarkable news regarding your wife. We ran a series of new, experimental tests on her last visit. Tests? She didn't mention any new tests, Ethan would say, a thread of confusion in his voice. It was a last-minute decision. And the results are, frankly, miraculous, Dr. Smith would continue, his tone perfectly calibrated. There's been a significant, spontaneous regeneration of her optic nerves. Mr. Miller, your wife can see. We estimate she regained nearly perfect 20/20 vision about a month ago. I imagined the silence on the other end of the line. A silence so profound it would feel like the world had stopped spinning. The scotch glass would freeze halfway to his lips. A month ago. His mind would become a frantic, terrifying highlight reel. The anniversary dinner. The green dress. The fake handbag. His meeting with Maya at a hotel bar. The whispers in the kitchen. The divorce papers he had signed that very morning. Every secret, every lie, every betrayal, he would now have to reevaluate through a horrifying new lens. She saw it all. The blind, helpless woman he had so easily deceived was a phantom. In her place was a woman who had been watching his every move, her eyes wide open. He hadn't been the manipulator, he had been the subject of a long, elaborate surveillance operation. Dr. Smith would deliver the final, devastating line. She asked me not to say anything, she wanted to tell you herself. But I felt you had a right to know. Congratulations, Mr. Miller. It's a true miracle. The call would end. He would be left in his expensive chair, in his glass-walled office, completely and utterly alone with the terrifying knowledge of his own stupidity. The power dynamic of his entire world had just irrevocably shifted. And I knew, with absolute certainty, what he would do next. He would come home. He would come home to fix it, to rage, to control, to do what men like him always do when they are exposed. And I would be there, waiting to end it. The sound of his tires screeching in the driveway was my cue. It was less than 30 minutes after I knew the call had been made. He had broken every speed limit to get here. The front door slammed open with such force that it hit the wall, the sound echoing through the silent house. "Sophia!" His voice was a raw, primal roar of fury and fear. I didn't move from my position on the living room sofa. I was sipping a chamomile tea, the very picture of tranquility. My dark glasses were in place. My hands were steady. Inside, my heart was a war drum, but I refused to let it show. He stormed into the room, his face pale and slick with sweat, his tie ripped loose at his collar. He looked like a wild animal. "The doctor," he gasped, his chest heaving. "He called me." I turned my head slowly in his direction. "Dr. Smith?" "Yes, I just spoke with him." "Isn't it the most wonderful news, Ethan?" My voice was light, airy, and utterly devoid of the emotion he was expecting. "Don't play games with me," he snarled, taking a step closer. "How long? How long have you been faking it?" Before I could answer, the kitchen door swung open and Maya sauntered in. She was holding a half-eaten apple, wearing my favorite cashmere sweater. She looked completely at ease, as if this were her house. "What's with all the drama?" she asked, crunching loudly on her apple. She looked from Ethan's frantic face to my calm one, and a slow, malicious smile spread across her lips. "Oh, I get it. The little blind mouse finally found her squeak?" She took another bite of her apple. "It's about time you grew a spine. Not that it matters." That was it. The casual contempt, the absolute certainty of her position in my home. It was the final provocation. Very slowly, I placed my teacup on the saucer, the clink of porcelain unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I reached up, and with a deliberate, theatrical motion, I removed my dark glasses. I folded them and set them on the table beside the cup. Then, I lifted my head and looked directly at my sister for the first time in 2 years. The effect was instantaneous. The smug smile vanished from Maya's face. The apple fell from her hand, thudding softly onto the expensive rug. Her face went slack with utter shock. You can see," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan just stood there, paralyzed, as if he were seeing a ghost. I rose from the sofa. I didn't rush. Every movement was calm and measured. I walked the few steps that separated me from my sister. She was frozen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You have been a guest in my home," I said, my voice low and level. "You have eaten my food, you have slept in my beds, and you have worn my clothes." My eyes flickered down to the cashmere sweater she was wearing. "And you have slept with my husband." I raised my hand and slapped her across the face. The sound was shockingly loud, a sharp crack that shattered the silence. It wasn't a wild, hysterical slap. It was a controlled, calculated act of retribution. Maya stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek where a bright red handprint was already beginning to form. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice wasn't a shout. It was a command. Ethan finally broke out of his stupor. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in like claws. "How dare you! You psycho! You will apologize to her right now." I didn't even flinch. I just looked at him, at the man I had once loved, now a stranger with a contorted face. "The only person I owe an apology to," I said, my voice dripping with ice, "is myself. For ever believing you were a man worth sacrificing for." I yanked my arm from his grasp with a strength he didn't know I possessed. "The show's over, Ethan. Pack your bags. And hers too. A process server will be here in the morning with your official copy of the divorce settlement you signed. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises." I turned my back on their stunned, silent faces, and walked away without a second glance. The next 2 months were about dismantling one life and building another. The divorce was finalized with brutal efficiency. Ethan, on the advice of a third-rate lawyer, tried to contest the signature, claiming he was tricked. But Ms. Davies presented the audio recordings in a closed-door session with the judge. The recordings of him and Maya mocking my blindness and plotting to wait for my father's death to get my inheritance were so vile that the judge not only validated the signature but sealed the proceedings to avoid a public scandal, granting me everything I'd asked for, including sole ownership of the house. I sold it immediately. I wanted no trace of that life. I moved into a sleek, modern apartment in the heart of the city and threw myself into my work at Thompson Enterprises. I was finally becoming the woman my father had always known I could be. And my life was unexpectedly filled with a new light, Nathan Foster. After Ethan's disastrous meeting, Nathan had reached out to my father, not to talk business, but to express his disgust at what he had eventually learned about Ethan's character. My father, ever the matchmaker, suggested he call me. Our first date was coffee. It lasted for 4 hours. He was everything Ethan wasn't: attentive, respectful, and genuinely interested in my thoughts, not just the sound of his own voice. He was fascinated by my journey, not pitying of my past disability. With him, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a whole person. A friendship bloomed, and it didn't take long for both of us to realize it was something much deeper. He proposed on a crisp autumn evening, 3 months after my divorce was final. We decided to announce it at a large gala my father was hosting, a way to reintroduce me to the world, not as Ethan Miller's poor, blind wife, but as Sophia Thompson, a woman in her own right, and the future Mrs. Nathan Foster. The night of the gala was magical. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was glittering with crystal and candlelight. I was wearing a gown the color of midnight, Nathan's hand warm and steady on the small of my back. I felt powerful. I felt happy. Which is, of course, when he appeared. I saw him first, a disturbance in the elegant flow of the crowd. Ethan. He was thinner, his expensive suit looked rumpled, and his eyes had a desperate, haunted look. He had somehow gotten past the formidable security. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes locking on me. The music faltered as people turned to stare. A bubble of silence expanded around us. "Sophia," he called out, his voice raw. Nathan and my father moved instinctively to shield me, but I stepped in front of them. This was my moment. This was the final act. "Hello, Ethan," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You can't do this," he said, his voice shaking with a pathetic mixture of rage and self-pity. He pointed a trembling finger that oscillated between me and Nathan. "You can't marry him. You're my wife. In the eyes of God, you are still my wife." A nervous murmur rippled through the hundreds of guests. "You destroyed me," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You and your rich daddy. You took everything from me. My house, my company, my life. All because of a little mistake." "A little mistake?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. I took the microphone from the nearby bandleader. My voice now echoed through the grand ballroom, crisp and clear. "Let's be clear about your little mistake, Ethan. Was it when you started sleeping with my sister? Or was it when you did it in our home, on our sofa, while I was just in the next room?" The crowd gasped. Ethan flinched as if I'd struck him. "Was your little mistake buying me a cheap, counterfeit handbag for our anniversary while you gave the real one to her?" I continued, my voice rising. "Or perhaps it was when you gave her the diamond ring we designed together, a ring that was supposed to be a symbol of our future?" I let the accusations hang in the air. "You didn't make a little mistake, Ethan. You made a series of cruel, calculated choices. You preyed on what you thought was my weakness. You saw me as a meal ticket, a disabled woman whose inheritance you and my sister were planning to live on after my father died. I have the recordings, if anyone would like to hear them." He was speechless, his face ashen. The guests were staring at him with open contempt. You talk about what I took from you, I said, my voice ringing with the finality of a judge's gavel. The house was bought with my money. The company was built on loans you secured using my financial standing as collateral. You came into my life with nothing, Ethan. And now, you will leave with exactly the same. You didn't lose your life. You just lost your access to mine. My father stepped up beside me then, taking the microphone. My daughter has been through an ordeal that no person should have to endure, he said, his voice booming with authority. She has emerged from it with a grace and strength that makes me prouder than I have ever been. She is the future of my company and the heart of my family. He turned to Nathan. And I could not ask for a better man to stand by her side. He then looked directly at Ethan, his eyes like chips of ice. Security, he said calmly. Please escort this piece of trash out of my hotel. As two large men took Ethan by the arms, he didn't struggle. He looked utterly defeated. His eyes met mine one last time, and in them, I saw the full, horrifying understanding of his loss. He hadn't just lost money. He had lost a life, a future, and any shred of honor he had left. He was nothing. The crowd erupted into applause as he was dragged away. Nathan wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. It was over. Truly over. This was the moment that changed everything, when I finally took back control of my own life. Thank you for staying with me to this point, you are amazing. Please, help me by liking this video and leaving a 2 in the comments, just so I know you've journeyed with me this far. It doesn't just help more people find this story, it lets me know that my experience means something to someone out there. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. In the wake of the gala, Ethan's public annihilation was complete. He became a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties and in boardrooms. He was professionally radioactive. No one would hire him. No one would even take his calls. I, on the other hand, was flourishing. The story, in a strange way, had liberated me. People no longer saw me with pity, but with a newfound respect. At work, I was no longer just the boss's daughter, I was a formidable executive in my own right. My life with Nathan was a balm on my soul. We were building a true partnership, based on trust and mutual admiration. I rarely thought of Ethan or Maya. They were ghosts from a past life. Maya, I'd heard through the grapevine, had fled to the West Coast the day after the gala, leaving a trail of debt and broken leases behind her. She had vanished, and I felt nothing but relief. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 6 months to the day I had walked out of our house, my private office line rang. It was an unlisted number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A ragged, broken voice on the other end answered. Sophia? It's me. Ethan. I didn't recognize his voice at first. It was stripped of its confidence, its arrogance. It was the voice of a man who had been hollowed out. What do you want, Ethan? I asked, my tone flat and professional. I had to call, he stammered. I saw the announcement online. About your wedding. You look happy. I am, I said simply. There was a long, painful silence. I could hear his shallow breathing. I messed up, Sophia, he finally whispered. God, I know I messed up. I think about it every day. Every single second. He started talking, the words pouring out of him in a desperate, pathetic torrent. He told me about his life now. He was living in a cheap, one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city. He'd lost the car, the designer clothes, everything. He was working a dead-end telemarketing job, selling scammy vacation packages to seniors. He told me he'd been forced to declare bankruptcy. The debt Maya had racked up on his cards had been the final nail in his financial coffin. She played me, Sophia, he said, his voice cracking with self-pity. She never cared about me. She was just using me to get to you, to your money. She took everything that was left and just disappeared. She was the monster, not me. I listened to him try to shift the blame, to paint himself as just another one of Maya's victims, and I felt a cold knot of contempt tighten in my stomach. Are you done? I asked when he finally paused for breath. I thought you should know, he whimpered. What she did to me. What she did to you. I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Let me be very clear, Ethan. Maya is a vile, opportunistic person. But she is not the reason your life is in ruins. You are. You made your choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to mock me and disrespect me in my own home. Maya was just your co-pilot. You were the one flying the plane into the ground. He started to sob then, ugly, gasping sounds. But I love you, Sophia. I see that now. It was always you. I was an idiot. Please, just tell me there's a chance. 1 in a million. I'll do anything. I thought of Nathan, of the quiet, respectful love he showed me every single day. I thought of the future we were building. And I looked back at the wreckage of the past Ethan was trying to drag me back into. There is no chance, Ethan, I said, my voice calm and final. There is nothing left here for you. Goodbye. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I blocked the number. And I did not shed a single tear. Life moved on. The wedding planning was a joyful whirlwind. My father was like a kid in a candy store, insisting on the best of everything. Nathan was my calm center in the storm, always reminding me that the only thing that mattered was us. For the first time, I felt a deep, settled peace. The ghosts of my past were finally fading. Or so I thought. About a month before the wedding, Nathan and I were leaving a small Italian restaurant in a quiet neighborhood after dinner. It was a chilly evening, and I was bundled in a warm coat, my arm linked through his. We were laughing about something my father had said, my head resting on his shoulder. It was a moment of perfect, ordinary happiness. And then I saw him. He was standing across the street, under a flickering street lamp, just watching us. It was Ethan. He looked even worse than he had sounded on the phone. He was rail-thin, his face gaunt, his eyes sunk into dark hollows. He looked like a stray dog, starved and beaten down by the world. A cold dread washed over me. Nathan felt me stiffen and followed my gaze. His arm tightened around me protectively. Do you want to leave? We can get in the car and go. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's time to end this. For good. I disentangled my arm from Nathan's and started walking across the street. Nathan was right beside me. Ethan saw us coming. A flicker of something that might have been hope crossed his face. Sophia, he breathed as we stopped in front of him. You need to stop this, Ethan, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. You can't follow me. You can't call me. You need to leave me alone. I can't, he said, his eyes pleading. You don't understand. I'm nothing without you. I see that now. Everything I did. I was trying to be the man I thought you wanted. Successful, powerful. I lost my way. I lost myself. No, I corrected him gently. You didn't lose yourself, Ethan. You revealed yourself. This desperation, this isn't love. It's ownership. You don't miss me. You miss the life you had with me. You miss the comfort, the status. You miss what I represented. That's not true, he insisted, his voice rising. I love you. The man I'm going to marry, I said, gesturing to Nathan, who stood silently beside me, a pillar of quiet strength, loves me. He loves me on my good days and on my bad days. He would love me if I were the heiress to Thompson Enterprises or if I were a checkout girl at the supermarket. He would have loved me if I had been blind for the rest of my life. He loves me, Sophia. You, Ethan, you loved the idea of me. And when the reality became inconvenient, you threw it away for something easier, something more exciting. Tears were streaming down his face now. Please, he whispered, a broken sound. Just give me one more chance to prove it. I'll go to therapy. I'll get a better job. I'll change. I looked at this man, this shell of a man who had caused me so much pain, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of pity. Not for his circumstances, but for the emptiness inside him that had made him this way. I hope you do change, Ethan, I said, and I meant it. I truly hope you find a way to become a better person. For your own sake. But you won't be doing it with me. I took a deep breath. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. And that peace is not possible with you in my life, not even on the fringes. This is the last time we will ever speak. Do you understand? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his face crumbling as the last, final door of hope slammed shut in his face. I turned, took Nathan's hand, and we walked away. I did not look back. I could feel his eyes on me until we turned the corner, but I did not look back. Our wedding day was bathed in the golden light of a perfect June afternoon. We were married in the gardens of my father's estate, surrounded by a small group of people who truly loved us. When I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I wasn't the broken, blind woman who had sacrificed her sight for a lie. I was Sophia Foster, a woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger, a woman who knew her own worth. As Nathan and I exchanged our vows, I looked into his eyes and saw my future. It wasn't a future of drama or deception, but one of quiet strength, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding love. It was real. A year passed. A year of healing, of laughter, of building a life. I was pregnant with our first child, and my work at the company was more fulfilling than ever. The past had become a distant country, a story I could tell but no longer felt. One afternoon, I was driving through a part of town I rarely visited. I was on my way to a site visit for a new warehouse for the company. I stopped at a red light, and my eyes drifted to the side of the road. There was a small construction crew, doing road repairs. One of the men, holding a stop sign, turned, and my breath caught. It was Ethan. He was wearing a dirty orange vest and a hard hat. His face was weathered, burned by the sun. He looked tired, anonymous, just another guy working a grueling job to get by. He didn't see me. I was just another anonymous driver in an expensive car. The light turned green. I drove on. In the rearview mirror, I watched him shrink into the distance until he was gone. There was no triumph, no gloating. There wasn't even pity. There was just nothing. He was a period at the end of a long, painful chapter. And I had finally turned the page. As I drove towards my future, my hand resting on my rounding belly, I thought about the journey. The darkness had not broken me, it had taught me to see. The betrayal had not destroyed me, it had taught me my own strength. As I walked away from that part of my life for the last time, I understood that good will always triumph over evil, and that we all deserve a life of happiness. Sometimes the hardest step isn't standing up to the people who hurt you, but giving yourself permission to walk away from toxic people, no matter who they are. Have you ever had a similar experience? Have you had to fight to protect yourself, to rediscover your own value? Have you had to leave toxic people behind to find your own happiness? I believe you deserve to live fully, free from the pain inflicted by anyone else. Please, comment "I deserve it" if you empathize with this journey. Every comment is not just a reminder to yourself, but a source of strength for others who are listening and need the courage to take that first step.